Welcome everybody to this quarter's online class in world religions. I'm Dr. John Mabry and I'll be your instructor for this quarter. I hope that you find that this is going to be a fun class. I think it's a really fun subject and I hope that you'll enjoy the class that's ahead of us. And I hope that it does what you want it to do, basically to give you a good grounding in the world's religions. Now, of course, it's kind of impossible to do justice to the world's religions in just 10 weeks. It's a huge subject, and we've only got a very little bit of time to do it. There's just so much information, and unfortunately, every tradition is so diverse that there's no way that we can even begin to cover it all. The diversity is a very good thing, but being able to cover it all, Well, so this is why I think Occhiogrosso's book, The Joy of Sects, is such a great book. Yes, I said The Joy of Sects. If you haven't picked it up, I hope you will do so very soon, because it really lays out not only the core of every tradition, but all the diverse movements within the tradition and how they relate to each other and how they differ from each other. Very, very important and a really great book. And again, a book that's an awful lot of fun. So I hope you'll enjoy that. One thing to pay attention to in this course, and that is when we're talking about matters of religion, paradox reigns supreme. As soon as you say one thing about religion, you can turn around and say exactly the opposite, and there's going to be someone who belongs to that tradition for whom that will be true as well. So part of the reason for this is that, well, religion is a profoundly irrational exercise. It's built up because of humankind's relentless pursuit of rationality, which, of course, is another paradox. But this is also one of the great joys of religion, and that is, it is irrational, it is paradoxical, it is maddening, and more than anything else, it's just plain weird. In fact, there's no end to the weirdness. No matter how much you draw up from the well of weirdness, you'll discover just as much weirdness is waiting for you in that well, deeper and more inexhaustible than ever. And that's why religion is so much fun. There's just so much psychedelic wackiness, and sometimes you just have to stop and shake your head and go, wow, people actually believe this. And it becomes even more profound when you get enough distance from the tradition that you practice or that you grew up in to see that it's just as wacky and weird as everything else. And that's part of the fun of it. So, if religion is such a carnival of irrationality, why should we bother with it? Because while it's full of oodles of glorious nonsense, it's also true, which is yet another paradox. So this begs the question, quo is veritas? What is truth? What do we mean by truth? In what way is the story of Shiva cutting off the head of his son and replacing it with the head of an elephant true? I'm not going to answer this for you now, but hopefully by the end of this quarter, you'll have a good sense of it. So, first of all, let's talk about, why do people even start religions? Religions don't just drop out of the sky. They don't just emerge out of a vacuum. They don't arise for no reason. Religions arise to meet particular needs, human needs that are common to all people. So what are some of these needs? For one, there's the need to survive. Pretty strong need. and a pretty big impulse towards religion. People need to understand the world around them and how it works. And tied into the survival thing is people like to have some control over their environment. And, as heretical as it might seem, some control over the gods. Some control over those things that are mysterious and that we can't control. And the fact that we can't control them causes a great deal of anxiety. Another reason for religion is the need to resolve issues in human nature. Why do we do the things we do? What are the conflicts and the problems that we have between people? And how does religion arise in order to mediate or to solve those problems? Because it does. Another reason that religions arise is, hey, we're going to die. We have a great fear of mortality. One of the things we like to have some control over is what happens to us. Also, religions arise because we feel like we want to be connected to something larger than ourselves. This, of course, is the transpersonal aspect of religion. I'm going to talk a little bit more about a little later. So, along the way, you're going to need to know some terminology. So, for instance, theism. What is a theistic religion? What does theism mean? A theistic religion is a religion that has a god. So this comes from the Greek word theos, which means God. So a religion that has a theos is a religion that has a god. There are, of course, then atheists, which are people who don't believe that there is a God. Nor in normal English we call this atheism. So theism, the belief in God; atheism, the belief that there is no God. And somewhere in between, there are agnostics. What's an agnostic? An agnostic is someone who says, I don't know if there's a God. Could be a God, could not be a God. I don't know. Insufficient data. Another term you're going to hear is monotheism. A monotheistic religion is a religion that believes that there is only one God. By contrast, a polytheistic religion is a religion that believes that there are many gods. A pantheistic religion is a religion that believes in pantheism. In other words, God across all. So a pantheistic religion is a religion in which it is believed that God is in everything, or perhaps everything is in God. Monism. We're just talking about pantheism again, but a little more nuanced. A monistic tradition says there's just one thing in the universe, and that thing is God. A form of pantheism? Oh yes, it is. And yet, you can have atheistic monism. And atheistic monism says, well, there's no God, but there's only one thing in the universe, and that one thing is matter. In other words, a monistic atheist would say that matter is all there is, and there's no such thing as spirit. So you're going to be encountering these terms, and I hope that you will do some research on your own and not simply rely on this brief little introduction that I'm giving you here about these things, because all of these terms have very long histories, and just like the histories of the religions that we're describing, very complex ones and very diverse opinions about them as well. Let's cover a couple of more. So, for instance, Gnostic. What's a Gnostic? A Gnostic is someone who believes that they are saved by knowledge. Gnostic religions are usually called that in the West. There's a whole Gnostic movement in the ancient world. There were Gnostic Jews and Gnostic Christians and Gnostic Greeks. And yet there are things about Gnosticism that are very similar to what you find in Eastern schools as well. So for instance, since Satori, or enlightenment, is a form of knowledge, is Buddhism also not a Gnostic religion? Well, some would say, yes, in fact, that it is. Another term is exoteric. Exoteric is usually talked about alongside another term, esoteric. What are these? Exoteric, when applied to a tradition, talks about the outward form of the tradition, where esoteric is sometimes talking about the soul of the tradition, what's happening on the spiritual or the transpersonal level. And then, of course, do we take something literally, or do we take something mythically? And are those two terms necessarily at odds with each other? Well, again, it kind of depends upon who you ask. But for many traditions, myth is more important than history. So I'll let you puzzle that one out a little bit. So a lot of traditions don't take their mythology literally. They wouldn't say, well, this actually happened. But there's something about the story that is incredibly valuable and also true. It tells us something true about the human condition or about the relationship between human beings and the divine.